What's up, Coordination? How you doing? On the pod today, we got Yancey Strickler, the founder of Kickstarter, also wrote a book called This Could Be Your Future that introduced me to the concept of Bentoism, beyond near-term orientation, the idea of going from now me to future us. How do we build economies and companies and DAOs that optimize for all of us and optimize for beyond near-term orientation? It's called Bentoism. Yancey's been a huge inspiration for me as I've gone down the Gitcoin rabbit hole and the Gitcoin DAO rabbit hole. And also, as I wrote GreenPilled, Bentoism is actually one of the first ideas that we put into the book. And so it's really cool to hear about his new project, MetaLabel, which is basically creation in multiplayer mode. And so Yancy is deeply talented, deeply networked, and has a lot of really great thoughts about how creators can work together in order to create what he calls MetaLabels. So I think this is a really fun episode, and it's been a lot of, it's just, Yancy's like a mentor and like an idol to me. So it's really great to green pill him on this episode. So without further ado, I give you Yancey Strickler, the founder of Kickstarter and of MetaLabel.
ReFi summer has arrived, and CELO is here for it. CELO is the layer 1 blockchain for the regenerative finance movement. It's fast, planet positive, and built for the real world. CELO has committed towards producing a sustainable future from the very beginning, and is the world's first carbon negative, EVM compatible layer 1 blockchain. CELO has become much more than a technology, a currency, a community, or even just a layer 1. CELO is a movement to create conditions of prosperity for everyone. You can soon engage with all of this via green asset Uniswap pools on CELO, benefiting reforestation and other regenerative products through the Toucan protocol, Moss, and more. ReFi is also about the health of communities, and Resource Network is creating bankless infrastructure for circular trade and mutual credit networks to benefit small businesses and local economies, all on CELO. Follow along on Twitter to learn more about how CELO is accelerating ReFi summer for a positive impact on people, communities, and the planet. If you're attending ECC, visit the CELO Saloon to learn about what's happening on the front lines of ReFi from industry experts. COINSHIFT is a leading treasury management and infrastructure platform for DAOs and crypto businesses who need to manage their treasury operations. Every crypto org needs to manage their treasury, and COINSHIFT offers a simple, flexible, and efficient multi-chain treasury management platform built on top of the extremely secure Gnosis Safe. With COINSHIFT, your organization can go from primitive single-chain treasuries to expressive, flexible, multi-chain features such as global user management, global contracts, proposal management, and many other features that can be shared across an entire organization. COINSHIFT layers on powerful treasury management tools on top of the proven security of Gnosis Safe, allowing users to save time and reduce operational burdens and gas costs. COINSHIFT even has data tools like account reporting across the 7 chains on which it operates. Used by industry powerhouses such as Uniswap Grants, Balancer, Consensus, and Messari, COINSHIFT is speeding up the coordination and efficiency of the organizations that use it. In DeFi, you have to keep up with the frontier, and COINSHIFT makes that easy. So sign up at coinshift.xyz/bankless.
Hey, Yancey, how's it going?
Hey, what's up, Kevin? How you doing?
Pretty good, thanks. Jumping between all the things. I think we both might be doing that. So can you tell us about MetaLabel and what took you here or got you to MetaLabel?
Yeah, so my name is Yancey Strickler. I'm one of 6 co-founders of MetaLabel. MetaLabel is a project that began a year ago and was really born out of a pain I felt as what I came to realize was a lonely creator trapped in the creator economy, where I was leading a community, had written a book. I was like doing all the hustles, and but really felt isolated, alone in this experience. And I ended up, my original background is in music, and I ended up thinking about how a lot of indie record labels work and how they are effectively groups of people who just all care about the same genre or idea, and they're collaborating to release work together. They're releasing work by others. They're like, every time Discord Records would put out a new punk record, it's like manifesting more punkness in the world. And I connected that structure with my experience and what I was experiencing with the group of people I was collaborating with. And what this has evolved into is MetaLabel. And a MetaLabel, like we as a group, a MetaLabel is a release club where groups of people who share the same interests collaboratively drop and support each other's work. And so a punk record label is a MetaLabel. It's a group of people who care about punk releasing work. But there are a lot of projects that fit this structure that we don't really think of as being labels. Like in the web today, there's something like mischief, I think is an example of a meta label in a really evocative way. I
Right.
think
Could you say more about mischief? Just
yeah,
I'm not sure that everyone knows what it is.
yeah, so mischief.xyz, although not a Web3 project, but they have a drop every 2 weeks that's always some different absurd comment on basically how manipulative capitalism is by always being these highly manipulative capitalist drops. They made skateboard shoes with Jimmy Fallon last week. They pay people's medical bills and sweepstakes. And they have all these distinct releases that ultimately create a kind of a worldview that if you're in on the joke, you get it. But I think Gitcoin is also an example of a meta label where you all are a group of people who are inspired by public goods, and you produce distinct releases, whether it's your funding grant rounds or kernel or Shelling Point or the DAO, that are all meant to manifest a greater appreciation for public goods in the world. And so I think that this structure where a group of people who care about the same aesthetic goal, cultural goal, activist goal, where they can pool resources, where they can drop work as a group. I believe that this is a needed piece of infrastructure, and it's something that describes a lot of really powerful projects in history. And I personally have experienced going from the lonely creator who's just like competing with everyone else for subscribers in the creator economy to now feeling more like I'm creating in multiplayer mode where I'm collaborating with 5 or 6 other people. And sometimes a drop is more mine to lead, and other people are supporting me. And we talk about how we hold each other's hands during a drop, like so, because those are anxious moments before you release something. But in other projects, like a drop MetaLabel is going to do this week, other people are the lead, and I get to support them and I get to help their vision. And so it is a different way of working, but yet also produces shared economic structures and a lot more. So I'm exploring something that brought me a lot of value personally in my life, and that we are building tools in a world to let other people do the same.
It's quite beautiful. So MetaLabel, you said, is creativity, multiplayer mode, a model for collaboration, collective world building, and mutual support. And I almost see this as an extension of your past work, which was as the founder of Kickstarter, which was kind of fundraising in multiplayer mode and cutting out the existing structures there. Do you see it on that continuum?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that, um, you know, Kickstarter created a new piece of infrastructure. It was a new model for how to fund work. It was a new model for how the public could be involved in a work or could validate a work. And I mean, it's to this date, it's like $6 billion have flown through to creative projects through Kickstarter, I believe, something like that.
That's
I mean,
amazing.
it's
You've probably touched
extraordinary. Yeah.
you've probably touched millions of lives then, the lives of millions of creators through that.
Quite indirectly, but sure. Very, very highly indirectly. But yes, I mean, I feel, I definitely look at Kickstarter as a model. I mean, like, for example, there was 4 years of us going around and pitching the idea of what now people call crowdfunding, 4 years of pitching without anything to point to. And it would take forever to explain what crowdfunding was, forever to explain, the intricacies of this. And then when you would show someone a web page, it took like less than 10 seconds. People are like, oh, why didn't you tell me? And I'm like, we were trying. It's just some things are easier to experience than explain. But yeah, I mean, I see Kickstarter as no one knew that there needed to be a door there, and then one appeared. And that door represented a way for creative people to go straight to their audiences to get support. And I believe that the door that does not exist, that is going to feel very obvious to people, is what are simple structures for us to collaborate together. And the beauty of the way we're building a meta label is, it is an on-chain entity. Its plumbing will be on-chain, but that will have a shared treasury where a certain percentage, every meta label will design their own economic structure, but a certain percentage of the revenue will all return to the meta label treasury, which can be used to invest in new projects or people can withdraw from, and it becomes growing capital over time. And that this is something that can happen just around a specific cause. If you and I just care about solar punk, and we're like, all right, we're going to make solar punk comics together, and all revenue from solar punk comics are going to our solar punk comic publisher that we're going to create, and we're going to give out a couple grand every month to a new solar punk artist because we want more people to appreciate that. Like, that becomes not some pie in the sky idea. That actually becomes a viable business model. That becomes something that for which there is infrastructure, for which there is tooling, and for which there is a term. And so we first announced the MetaLabel concept in February. Like we published this essay I had written and been working on for about a year, thinking about it. And since then, we've heard from several hundred groups writing in, being like, "I think you've just described what I am, and I didn't know what I was, and I've struggled to say what I was." And currently, right now, we're running a cohort program called Assembly, where we invited groups to apply, and we picked 39 amazing groups all around the world, half of which I'd say are Web3, half are not web at all. They're cultural. And we're all together learning how to collaborate, how to release work, how to create catalogs, having people like Stone Kempen to talk about how to collaborate, or Extinction Rebellions as a cohort and a member of the cohort. And so, this idea has definitely found people for whom this is already like a very valuable way of working, but it's one that hasn't fit in. And so we think that, much like crowdfunding was a door that needed to exist, I very much think the same for MetaLabels, and that it's like a model that's in between a for-profit and a nonprofit, and it's a model that maximizes for cultural impact, and that's what great record labels have always been. That's what great art galleries have been. That's always what great magazines have been, and they struggle to survive in the for-profit context. But I believe this is a context where they can flourish and last.
Great. So take me forward. Let's call it 10, 15 years. If MetaLabel is really successful, what will that have unleashed? Can you paint me a picture of that world?
Well, I think that MetaLabel is a part of a larger series of changes that I believe that the internet, this is going to sound like so boomer, but I'm going to build on this. The internet re-individualized us all. Before the internet, our lives were determined by where we grew up and who our families were and what we looked like to a large degree. After the internet, we've now have this infinite space going deeper in this imaginary world of the web that has overwrapped and enveloped everything and is becoming more powerful than the physical world that gave birth to it in the first place. And so on the web, we are discovering these infinite selves. This is a concept I call being a post-individual, where you can create these infinite different individualized selves and alts that are all real to some degree or not. And online life is filled with how all those alts and people interact with each other. And what I believe is that in an individualistic world, what matters is something like, it's a creator economy thing. How many followers do I have? How many people listen to my broadcast is like an individualist way of thinking. A post-individualist way of thinking, which is what I think the world is moving into, is more like, what private chats am I a part of? What DMs? Who's DMing me and who do I DM back? What is the quality of my network? To what groups do I belong? Because what you discover is, if you look back to the moment when humans were first individualized, there's two great books on this, The Weirdest People in the World by Joseph Heinrich and Inventing the Individual by Larry Seidentop. And they both point to a moment when the Catholic Church in about 1000 AD, roughly, the Catholic Church began to ban cousin marriage. Not a phrase you're expecting to hear on the GreenPilled podcast today. But the church decided to ban cousin marriage. And what happened was that until that point, families acted more like clans, and cousins within families would marry each other to create more centralized familial clan power. And when the church prohibited this, gradually and then very quickly, it changed society, because suddenly young people had to meet people in other clans. And so there had to be new spaces where people could meet each other. And it was within about 100 years of this happening that the city, the university, the guild, and the monastery were all invented. And so what happened when people became individuals? They had to create new structures that allowed them context to coordinate, to make meaning, to do things together. And so that's quickly what they discovered and what they did. The web has similarly re-individualized. It's pulled us from our familial contexts in a different kind of way. And online, we're individuals in a very multiplicitous kind of way. And I think that what we're moving towards is a world where we are creating the institutions of the 21st century and the next several centuries that are going to be based on online kind of first principles that are, and in that world, the groups that we are all members of, that we can call ourselves members of, become incredibly meaningful. And in that world, I believe that creative people need a kind of a squad structure to work together, that they will similarly need the economic resources and the allyship and the mutual support that a lot of other forms of identity will also create. And so in that world, it's in that world that I think a meta label or a structure very much like it becomes incredibly important, because these ultimately become new sources of income and solidarity and sustainability for their members. And so I believe a world where right now labels are seen as elitist, but that's just because there aren't enough of them. I want a world where there's millions of labels and everyone belongs to multiple communities through which feed them in different ways, economic ways, creative ways, emotional ways. And that's what I think, where I think we're going. And so I would say, like, DAOs and meta labels, I think they're more the smoke than the fire. And the fire is the way that the internet continues to change society, and we are moving along through those changes with eyes semi-open as we're colliding and trying to make it.
Yeah. So it sounds like the meta label is part of a broader context in which the internet it has re-individualized ourselves, and now we're kind of like talking about a post-individualist squad that is creating together. And this actually feels like a great segue into talking really briefly for the listener about the concept of Bentoism, which I first read about when I read your book. This can be our future. This could be our future. Do you want to talk about Bentoism? Because I think the idea of future us and now us kind of fits into that.
Yeah, the Bento is basically a thought structure, a decision making framework that I worked on and built a community around for several years. And the Bento is an acronym that stands for Beyond Near-Term Orientation. And one day I was thinking about the concept of self-interest, and I was doodling in a notebook a hockey stick graph. And I thought, this is our image of self-interest today, like to see in your slide deck that revenue's going up. That's it.
To the right, yeah.
Up and to the right. And I just, I don't know, I just tried extending the lines of the X and Y axis, because I thought, the time axis keeps going as far into the future as we want. And also the axis measuring self-interest, I also think that keeps growing. Like, that can go infinitely. And also, the more your self-interest grows, like, other things happen too. And so when I expanded this, suddenly there's this giant space, and this like hockey stick graph is just this tiny little mark in one corner of it. It ended up turning this into a basic sort of 2x2 of 4 quadrants. And the bottom left box is now me. And that's where that hockey stick graph lives. And that's the concept of self-interest that we all live with generally today, which is, what I want and need right now is what matters. And these are like low things on Maslow's hierarchy. But if you move to the bottom right box, you see future me. which is the person that you will become or you hope to become. And what you quickly realize as you see that is that person becomes real or not real at any given moment based on what now me is doing. If you move up to the top left, above now me, you have now us. Because as your decisions, as your self-interest grows, you have responsibilities. Your decisions affect your family, the people around you. So thinking about them and their needs is also a part of your self-interest. And finally, you have future us in the top right corner, which represents your kids, if you have them, or future kids. And you see how the choices you make, you should make them thinking about their interests and just like filtering your choices, through what it would do for them and what's important for them. And as I like came upon this form for the first time, it instantly felt very true to me. And I'd written down a very basic description: beyond near-term orientation. That's what this was a picture of. And I realized that made an acronym for bento, like the bento box. And the bento box is great because the whole idea is that it's honoring this Japanese dieting tradition called hara hachibu, which says the goal of a meal is to be 80% full. That way you're still hungry for tomorrow. So a bento is like a similar idea. It's a way to make you aware of these other spaces in which your decisions live, in which they have impact, and in which like you have deep vested interests, but generally we struggle to think about with much clarity. And so the bento is a tool. It's a tool to just make you more aware of what's already happening for you and what you want to have happen. And so it's still something I use frequently. And the Bento Society was an amazing community I led for a couple of years that had a couple thousand members, and just something I believe very strongly in.
Beautiful. I mean, I think it was kind of a mind-blowing moment for me to learn about Bentoism in that 2x2 matrix of now me, now us, future me, and future us. And one of the things that I did in the GreenPilled Book, which is this book that I wrote about how crypto could regenerate the world, was I actually played with expanding that out from a 2x2 matrix to like a 16x16 matrix. And so I expanded the time out from now me plus 1 hour me, plus 1 day me, plus 1 week me, plus 1 month me, plus, you get the idea. And then I expanded the collective angle from me to me and my wife, to me and my wife and our kids, me and my wife and my family, me and my wife and Gitcoin DAO, basically out until all of humanity. And, like the Dunbar's number thing about how you can only care about 500 people at once. And so I'm actually wondering, just to kind of ask you point blank, if you have any problem with that, like forking it and adding a bunch of different axes, because the gradient of that is quite beautiful. When you're thinking about your DAO and how many people you're kind of thinking about when you're governing it. I thought it was interesting to expand and build on top of Bentoism.
I love it. Let's make it canon. I'm into it. I saw someone else made a bento that expanded it to past me and past us. I've seen others go like more boxes on top to go to more of like universal values. That is my hope. I mean, I came to recognize in thinking about a MetaLabel concept that like the bento is a release by me, and it's a release in a series of projects that are all related to exploring concepts of value in the self. And like the dark forest theory of the internet, a piece I did a few years ago, is an example of this. A lot of the work on Kickstarter, even the work on MetaLabel, is all in a similar place. But there's a real power when you as an individual or you as a group of people can come to see like that deeper through line in your work, can come to understand like what it really is you're trying to reinforce with your projects. And then that allows you to be more creative in how you express them, right? Like I feel like for Gitcoin, the clarity of public goods creates a lot of permission to like meme more easily and to do a lot of other things, right?
It's
and
directional in meme space for everyone.
Yeah. There's a great line that Charlie Waterhouse, who's one of the creative directors of Extinction Rebellion, said in our assembly thing the other day, which is, if he's talking to a group of MetaLabels, and he says, if you're a MetaLabel, and he sees Extinction Rebellion as a MetaLabel, if you're a MetaLabel and you have your purpose right, then it doesn't matter if your releases are good or bad. What matters is like you're telling a story in the long run, and you are like you're creating a world. You're building a world for other people to participate in. In the case of something like XR, you're trying to make your world so powerful it comes to overtake, certain levers of power in the wider world. But for other communities, it's probably just to be recognized, or just to not feel alone, or just to have a collaborator when you need one. And so that, if I think about where the creator economy has left us, of like we all have our own subscription lists we're trying to build and all this sort of stuff, to me it says the goal of like we're all the star of our show is like not a great goal. And a goal where we're part of a group of people who are successful in expressing themselves the way they wish to express, but we're more like a boy band than Bieber, like I think that's yeah, I think that's a viable path, and I think it's one that a lot of people will gladly opt into.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing really better than seeing your friends in your squad succeed, and I think that the joint success is more powerful than the individual success in a lot of ways. And I guess I'm wondering like how these groups find each other. I actually just had Balaji Sivarasan on the podcast, and he was talking about the network state and how each network state has to have what he calls a one commandment, which is something that you think is wrong with the world that you want to correct, and that becomes your sort of aggregator, your mimetic filter. Would you say that each meta label has to have a one commandment, or can it just be based off of the vibe of a certain group or something else?
We have it designated, and we have a tool on our site, metalabel.xyz. It's the one called Elements of MetaLabel to help you do this. But the way I would classify that is purpose. Every MetaLabel has to have a purpose, and that purpose is expressed through releases. So a MetaLabel is not just like a passive social club. Like it exists to create work and put it into the world. And how it does that is incredibly open-ended. It can be software, events, whatever, protests. But what makes it powerful is if you have disparate voices, disparate artifacts that are all reinforcing that same core purpose. But that purpose could be, for Discord Records, it was like you're a kind of a punk band or a hard band around Washington, D.C. If you are the Royal Society, which is the group started in the late 17th century that literally inspired the Enlightenment, they've been like a credentialed society of people who believe in science for like 600 years, and they've made zines that are scientific journals. And so I believe that there is that calling, because really, like, why do you join something? You join something to be a part of something bigger than you. So it's going to need to have something at its heart that moves you, that speaks to your spirit. I don't think you're going to do these things. In my mind, a meta label is not an investment club. You're not doing it because it's like, let's get rich together. You're doing it because you believe in a shared vision or future. You believe that an idea is unappreciated. Yeah, but in a Balaji language, yeah, saying it's about a disagreement with the world that, like, maybe some groups would use that language. Maybe other groups would object to that language and would see it in a softer way. But I think that might be a reasonable way to put it.
It's just interesting to me, the sort of pluralism of different ways that people are talking about collective action online, from literally talking about it in an academic language, collective intelligence, to talking about it as a DAO, to talking about it as squad wealth, to talking about network states, to talking about meta label. I kind of am envisioning, I see like a cheat sheet of what attributes each of these has and how they relate to each other. But I'm on metalabel.xyz, which we'll definitely put in the show notes. And it says that the elements of a meta label are the purpose, a squad, releases, and then participation. So found that quite interesting.
Yeah. So basically, if your group of people, if you define what your purpose is, why you're a group, if you define who the members are, if you define what type of releases you want to put out, we're going to write posts, we're going to do a podcast, we're going to throw events, and you determine your rules of participation, which is who owns what, how does money work. If you come to decisions about those things as a group of people, it will create just organically a shape and an output of your work. We're going to have case studies soon on the MetaLabel site where we'll show how this applies to someone like the Royal Society or someone like the Guerrilla Girls, these great activists in the 80s and today, and demonstrate how that framework and structure really does produce a consistent output. And so that I think becomes really powerful and allows these labels to build a catalog.
Okay. Got it. So the releases form a catalog, and over time, I guess that like is the vessel through which the cultural impact of the meta label happens.
Exactly.
Immutable X is the layer 2 platform for crypto gaming. Immutable offers massive scalability with up to 9,000 transactions per second and instant transaction confirmation. No more gas fees, no more waiting around for your transaction to clear. Immutable's zero knowledge rollup finally unlocks the world of crypto gaming. Immutable X is the only gas-free NFT minting platform with over 26 million NFTs minted, all with zero gas fees. With the power of Immutable, gaming developers don't also need to become smart contract developers, they just need to plug in to Immutable's API and instantly start unlocking the full potential of crypto assets inside of games. This is why world-class companies and projects have decided to deploy on Immutable X, like GameStop, Ember Sword, Planet Quest, Illuvium, TikTok, and many more behind the scenes. So start building your game on Immutable X today at immutable.com. The Opera crypto browser is the world's first web browser built for the crypto community. With Web3 support and a non-custodial wallet, Opera lets you access DeFi apps quickly and easily. The Opera wallet has buy, sell, and swap features, and of course lets you view your beautiful NFTs, but the browser still lets you use any crypto wallet extension you prefer, giving you the choice and flexibility for the Web3 world. Opera lets you view and manage all of your assets across all the blockchains all at once, and offers seamless multi-chain support between Ethereum, Bitcoin, Polygon, Binance Chain, and other EVMs and layer 2s. But Opera goes even deeper than that. Opera has a built-in homepage for crypto natives with the Opera Crypto Corner, with price charts, news feeds, NFT updates to make sure you are always on top of your game. And it even has Discord and Telegram integrated natively into the browser. That's crazy. Opera is truly building the battle station for the crypto world. Check out Opera both on mobile with Android and iOS apps, and on desktop too.
Beautiful. Are there examples of MetaLabels that you're able to talk about now? I know that you're running your first cohort right now, but it might be too early to talk through any of them. Can you say more about tangible examples?
Yeah, sure. I would look at Songcamp, which is a project I imagine some of your listeners know about of their releases. There was the first Songcamp camp, then there was Electra, and then Chaos. But each of those were a distinct drop by a group of musicians dedicated to reimagining what it is to release music, how to release music. And together they've made 3 drops to date. And their last drop made, over $500,000 in ETH when they released the Chaos Packs last month. And so, Matthew Chaim, the founder of Songcamp, he joined us at Assembly, and he talks about his work, and really he sees a MetaLabel as being a container designer, where it allows a group of people to collaborate together on a project. We also have in that group several DAOs like the Voyager DAO, or even a project like Catalog that also very much connect with the MetaLabel framing, because there are groups of people who maybe care about independent music or about certain types of culture, and they have a lot of different skill sets in their group, and they want to drop different kinds of releases, and they're interested in funding works. And so the MetaLabel model is something that fits with them quite well. And then, a personal favorite of mine is a group called the Wide Awakes, which is started by the artist Hank Willis Thomas. Members of the Roots are members. It's a group of activists and artists who decided that they wanted to do all their political work together under one name. And through that, they've done things like put billboards in all 50 US states, created a mobile soup kitchen. They throw big street parties celebrating community activists. They find interesting ways to fund their projects. And they do all these disparate drops that are all quite unexpected. And they all have this core theme of helping people become wide awake to their community. And it's just a beautiful project that is hard to tell what it is from the outside. But once you begin to see the world through this lens of there are groups of people who have a shared purpose and they just do different releases together, then suddenly you could see the underlying structure. And so I personally think that there are many examples around us, and that a number of DAOs will end up creating MetaLabels, so creating explicit arms of their activity that is about dropping things, creating releases, creating culture. I mean, FWB, I think, is like the gold standard at this with so much of what they do. Nouns is another fun example. But so I think that this is a form that is kind of internet native, is rising, and I think something that more and more people are going to want to be a part of.
Right. Yeah, I gotta say the MetaLabel.xyz website is just beautiful, and I know that this is an audio only pod, so we can't transmit that to anyone who's listening out there. But it strikes me as just this totally genuine, high fidelity look into these meta labels, and it feels so much more beautiful, the art that I'm seeing at these meta labels that I'm checking out, than anything that could be created by some top down monolithic record label. And I'm wondering if that's a feature because of the bottoms up nature, or the caliber of people that are involved in meta label. You just kind of get better art or more sincere storytelling. I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that an attribute of meta labels, you think?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, the art is Ilya Yudinov, who's amazing, and is one of our co-founders. I mean, yes. So one, I think, because the meta label structure is, I mean, it is, in our experience, only speaking from the experience of us as a group, like it's extremely collaborative, where we are 7 people who are all have amazing pedigrees of projects, and we are bringing our best selves to improve each other's work. And there is a way that this project just speaks to us, and that we have been extremely authentic in how we've expressed it, where like maybe it's been a little bit opaque sometimes, but also like we're figuring it out and we're trying to express things as well as we can. And like it's all been a very genuine process of discovery that has come to a place of such clarity that it's like, did we plan this? Like this is kind of weird, how well it's evolved, and kind of by listening. But I do think that the ability of if you have the right mix of people, the ability of a meta label structure to allow a range of contributions, to guide them directly towards a focused release. I mean, we use a film set a lot as a metaphor for how we work together, where in a film set, it's made up of all people who are experts at their craft, and everyone has their own say in their own craft. And there's also a director level vision that's just holding like, what is this all meant to add up to? And so for each meta label release, we're all craftspeople handling our different parts, but the director is different on each project, and that director will be the holder of, this is what it should be like or shouldn't be like. And so forms like that they're naturally egalitarian. I think they're like both expert driven and egalitarian in their structure a bit. And so even the way that we have approached our work, it's very meta, where we're thinking about the way we do things is maybe how other groups will do things. So let's document what we do. But that has produced a lot of great outcomes. And we're working on a structure of lifetime planning to have a max of 12 full-time seats at MetaLabel. Each of those seats having the same pay, similar ownership. We'll have a wider pool of liquid contributors and community contributors to which we're rewarding in all kinds of ways. And is it possible to make a great product and stay and also be like a creative studio that has different kinds of drops and that has fun and isn't locking itself into extractive platform economics? And so I think, like for myself, having done Kickstarter, for my co-founder Rob Kalin, who ran Etsy, we are both very inspired by the power that platforms can create and that the web can create for creative people, but we're also not inspired to, create overly big or overly extractive or overly complicated or overly, just like business maximizing projects. I think there's more interesting ways to go about things these days.
Right. So in the bento analogy, you're kind of creating it for future us. It feels like you've expanded out in those directions.
Yeah. Well, I think I wrote a piece for FWB a few weeks ago called After Crypto, and just thinking about, like, I look at all the infrastructure that's been laid through the last 12 years of blockchain development, and I think a lot about Carlota Perez's book, Technological Revolutions and Financial Capital, where she analyzes all these past economic booms and major technological transformations. And what she finds over and over is that initially there's a huge burst of interest, euphoria. Um, Ordinary people get wrapped up in the euphoria. Everyone's like, yeah, let's build the railroad from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. We're all going to get rich. We're going to build the railroad. And they build the railroad, and there's no utility, and it crashes, and the bubble bursts, and the whole technology just seems to die. And she shows over and over this happens. But then it's after that period that there becomes this real implementation and deployment period as other people find utility out of all these sometimes literal rails, or in other cases, just like infrastructure that gets made. And when I look at the infrastructure of a blockchain, the infrastructure of like the group of projects we'll call Web3, to me, cross-platform, post-platform utility is like, once you see it, you can't unsee it. For us, from the moment someone creates their MetaLabel using our tools, that group will be portable and able to create utility on all kinds of other places and move together as a group, not as a single player mode, but in multiplayer mode. Once you see the way you can distribute influence and even ownership beyond the walls of your employee base and investors, like, you can't unsee it. Once you see the way that content and data and our histories, can be held in perpetuity and not taken down at the whims of a single company, or if they go out of business, all your vines are gone. Like, all of these things are just answer to me what have been fundamental structural challenges. And how can you not build on these things? And so I think from the vantage point of today, that does feel future us. But to me, that feels like, I don't think it's far. I don't think that type of utility and people really feeling a meaningful difference in their lives based on some of the things that happen as a result of that, I don't think that's far. And my feeling is that MetaLabel is a part of a wave of projects, which will include projects from the last waves, that the gnosises of the world, that are going to keep just crushing it. But I think that we might be a part of a new set of projects that isn't centering crypto, but is deriving a lot of value from its infrastructure, from its tools, is using the tools in a lot of ways that they were intended, but that I think might hit a little different. So we'll see whether that ends up being the case.
Yeah. It's so beautiful to hear you talk about this vision that you have and have it be deeply informed by your experience in supporting creators in many different parts of your career. But I gotta ask, because after I think it was after ETH Denver, you had written a post about crypto and your experiences at ETH Denver, and I think that some of it was kind of critical of ETH Denver, or of crypto. And I know that you're kind of not all sold on different parts of the Web3 ecosystem, and so I hear you using different language when you talk about MetaLabel than we typically use in crypto. We hear you talk about MetaLabels and not DAOs. You're designing the long-term incentives of your MetaLabel, which we would call governance. And I just got to ask you, what do you say when people say what do you say when people critique working in Web3? I mean, I think there's so many people out there that think that Web3 is just scams, and there are some scams out there. But how do we not throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to building these systems for collective action?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that I've been using the terms that make sense to my brain as been, it's not intentionally trying to create an alt vocabulary. I think it's just how I have come to make sense of it. But yeah, I think that I would say I believe very much in the technology, and I'm like not a hater on on NFTs in any way or form, or really anything of like that. Um, but I do think that there is a hyper financialized culture that is antithetical to everything a creative person cares about. I do believe that there is most viral Twitter threads are people like A/B testing extreme positions to try to see if they can get caught up in, the hive mind for the day. And so what is seen as, someone's like, all DAOs are going to do this in the future. And it's someone who has no experience building anything real. They've never had a job. And yet these are opinions that we are using, that's shaping anyone who's exposed to that is like having some shape on how you feel. And so I guess I think that there are a lot of turnoffs. There are a lot of turnoffs that are cultural turnoffs where I would say of creative people in my life, I think there are very few of them who think anything good about crypto, except for things I've talked about it. Because they're just like, isn't this the worst shit? Like what? And I know the reasons why that's not true, but I also think that is true. I think they're not wrong. And so I think that part of validating a space, I think, is about just speaking what's true. And if things are bullshit, it's good to talk about what's bullshit. And it's great when communities police themselves. And so, I'm just interested in that in the long term. And so, yeah, nothing strategic here. I think just sort of like a genuine processing out loud what my own feelings have been. And, so where that's led me is to like tune out Twitter, but to work a lot on, product implementation realities and spend a lot of time studying, white papers and standards and protocols and just focusing on what's real and not what people want to be real. And I think that there's an immense amount there. And I'm excited to be, building with it.
Yeah. You wrote this really great article for FWB called After Crypto, which is kind of a critique of what it can and can't do. And I'm just link that in the show notes here. Your critiques of crypto and people sort of racing to the bottom of the brainstem on Twitter, trying to create some sort of controversy for themselves. And then the pump and dumps and the hyper financialization stuff. It's hard for me just hearing you say it to me, not put that into your previous framing about moving to post-individualist society. And for me, it almost feels like what you and Toby from Other Internet are doing with Squad Wealth and what you're doing with MetaLabel is like you're almost taking the atomic unit of am I optimizing for now me, that marshmallow test, the instant gratification, to you're moving it to now us or future us, because you're making the atomic unit of how we do economics, the MetaLabel and the squad. And what to me is deeply meaningful about that is that we can all have complementary skill sets and work together in order to create something that's meaningful, and it becomes something that's shared. And by expanding from this like marshmallow test of just what's good for me now and out into the squad, it feels like more meaningful structures can be created there. I don't know if that's just my interpretation, though. I'd be curious for your critique of that.
A trillion percent. When I started writing This Could Be Our Future, it was, I was really spending a lot of time asking myself this question of like, what plausible change could I imagine that would like most benefit, the most people or whatever. Not like an effective altruism way of thinking, but just like I was reading a lot of philosophy and just trying to think about these things. And where I arrived was thinking expanding our concept of the self, expanding self-interest to include a wider set of actors than just ourselves today. I believe even if just like we're all taking care of our families slightly better, like that might be the biggest reachable step change towards like a better world, as as hopelessly optimistic as that may seem. Um, but really that like, it's not from expecting people to become enlightened in certain ways. It's just like, just expand your circle of who you feel responsible for, who you care about, who your decisions are incorporating. Like maybe that is the best we can hope for. And so the bento was like a toolkit way of approaching that, and a meta label is a structural way. It's exactly, I mean, it's all on the same. Like I began thinking and making notes on the post individual concept while also working on the bento in that book, and they're all in the same package of like kind of me answering my own questions of who am I and feeling lonely and finding my people, creating your chosen family. I think a lot of it is like a self-processing, I think is certainly involved, but yeah, it's all part of a larger package. And I do, I do think about that like my dream with MetaLabels that a release club becomes an accepted piece of infrastructure, and that right now 3 Substack writers who all write about the environment, who all are secretly feel they're competing with one another for attention. The moment the 3 of them are like, yo, why don't we do this together? How about we each write a thing, every other week, and we edit each other and we all promote each other's posts and we create some money that we use to put towards things we care about. Like, that doesn't negate them having their own solo practices. It's just creating a space where their incentives can be aligned and their work can be adding up to something greater than them. And that, the feeling when you get that, the feeling when you have that, it's like there are only so many times in life that you get the feeling of being a part of something greater than you. Like, I've maybe had it 3 or 4 times in a real way, and I don't know that there's anything better. And so I think that making that accessible to more people, I think it's a transforming kind of experience, and so yeah. So I think making that connection is, I think you're right on, and I appreciate that depth of recognition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, in no small way, this could be our future, and the story of Bentoism really influenced me. And one of the ways I sort of frame the turn that I would like to see in Web3, everyone's kind of looking for the next wave all the time, but for me, I'd love to see us move into a more regenerative direction, which means that resource allocation moves over time, or moves up over time, which is the future dimension. And then the whole thing about public goods is basically taking the bento all the way from the individual all the way out to the whole world, which is kind of, maybe overshooting the Overton window of what's possible now. But, I guess, how would we build a more bentoist Web3? Is that a rotation that you want to see, and how do we program our values into our money in order to create a more bentoist Web3?
Yeah, it was when I had already been following, blockchain projects for a while, but it was when I saw you sharing the bento on Twitter, and then Peter Pan joined the Bento Society, and Scott Moore from Gitcoin joined the Bento Society. Jian Long from Optimism joined the Bento Society, and then I discovered like this ideological alignment I didn't know. It was like I kind of became aware of it through you, and so to find a community of people that was thinking about public goods, was thinking about these other spaces, was imagining creating infrastructure for the next generation of builders, even as they're getting started. um, to me, that's just like that's like apex kind of shit. Of just like,
So it feels like the starting point is creating like a social Schelling point where we're all talking about it at least, and then
yeah, well, it's like we've all, it's like I forget there are all so many great lines about what maps are, but it's like we're starting with a map that includes those spaces, and so the fact that like any Web3 project, in a way, because of Gitcoin, in a way, they have to be like, what is your public goods position? What are you doing? What are you doing for public goods? Like you're stepping into this space, like prove your bona fides. So I think that there's a lot of really pro-social values that are already deeply ingrained, whether it's having to publish tokenomics and the insider outsider ownership of the structures of these projects in the very beginning. That creates a different impact on the outcome. There's a lot of different ways that I think the scales are balanced a bit more, but it's still, as always, going to be a tension between capital and social movements, and it's going to be a tension between near-term desires and long-term goals. And I think that the work that you all have done has done a lot to, and hyperstructures from Jacob and all kinds of great folks. It's like very much tilted the cultural scales towards one direction. And the question is, as Web3 and crypto gets even bigger, and if people start like actually getting customers at scale, will it persist? Because Web2, of course, also began with lots of wonderful beliefs that eventually Facebook ate the world, and then Facebook seemed like the only company that represented all internet companies, and there you have it. So it could just be Moloch again. We'll see.
yeah. Do you think we're on that path with Web3?
Not so far. But I think that there are. It's hard, it's hard to say. I've had people express a lot of concern about the degree of stakes VCs will have in a lot of different projects, and what happens if like someone controls a significant percentage of like almost every major protocol. Like what dangers does that create? So I don't, it's hard to say, but I think in general you just have to assume that everything has the light and the shadow, and that they will constantly be in tension with one another. And there's no such thing of only one. So I think you have to be prepared for that.
Yeah, I kind of feel like the Internet of Value gives us the ability to distribute value across the computer network. And for the first time, we can program our values into our money and do it in a global scale. And what's so interesting to me about that is that, in the meat space, I grew up in Pennsylvania in this small town, and my social circle and who I married and what I'd be doing for work would just be based out of that geographic area. But now any interest I have is have immediate access through the internet to creators who are like me. It just allows us to index on interests and memes instead of physical geography. And that gives me a lot of hope that we can assemble these hyperstructures that support people along that infrastructure. And I think that you're doing really, really important work there. But I'd like to really think that if we can program our values into our money, we can move from don't be evil to can't be evil, and build these institutions that will be pro-social, provably and from the ground up. But I think I might be kind of smoking my own hopium given the state of the market today. So it's good to know that you sort of toss around these debates as well.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, I think you just I would say this go around making MetaLabel, I can feel my experience. I can feel that I've gone through things before that have wizened me, that have made me a little more patient, or um, and I think one of the things I take from that is just that there is a constant balancing that you want to be prepared for, and yeah, just like human nature is never just one way. So I think that there is So, in the same way that a lot of people might look and say, oh, we're all on our phones. And so everyone is like hyper individuals at this moment. And we've never been more individualistic than now. But I believe at the same time that is true, there's this other thing that is rising at the same moment, because we're all realizing the hollowness of just being a sovereign individual, that actually that's an extremely limited experience. And that to get anywhere, to do anything, it takes coordination and alignment with others. And the better coordinated and aligned you are, the more influential and meaningful your work and your life will be. And, you've had to work hard to have that life experience. You've had to go beyond the lines of like the single player mode of how we're all taught to think, to do that. And, MetaLabel is going to be a part of a slew of Web3 projects that are going to make being a part of a squad, being a part of something bigger than you, like as trivial and as easy as anything else. And I think that's going to really change how people think about this kind of work and how willing they are to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I sure hope so. I'm realizing we're over the hour right now, so I think we should probably get to wrapping up. I could spend another 5 minutes. I don't know how abruptly you want to wrap up, but is there anything I didn't ask you that you want to say before we do?
I don't think so. No, this was great. I really appreciate it.
Well, I got to say, Yancy, you've been such an inspiration for me, both through your work at Kickstarter with your book, This Could Be Our Future, which we'll link in the show notes, and MetaLabels. Can't wait to see where it goes. And where can people find you online? Where can people learn about what you're up to?
ystrickler.com or Twitter handle ystrickler. Yeah, come say what's up.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much, Yancy.
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it.